Hello, church. Welcome to another class on Matthew. Hopefully, you've had a great day and that everything is going well in your life. I know it's exciting that everything's starting to open up again and you're able to go outside a little bit more. I know with some of you, you're still not quite able to, and we're not still able to do a lot of things that we like to do, like meeting together as a church. But it kind of gives me hope and hopefully gives you some hope too that we can get back to normal pretty soon and hopefully get together again pretty soon and do these classes in person. Um, and I can hear your comments, and it's just a better situation than me just talking to my laptop for 30 minutes or so. So I much rather and can't wait. But we're in Matthew, and we're going to make the best of it that we can. I've really enjoyed our study. I've learned a lot through it so far. We'll be studying Matthew 9, verse 35 through chapter 10, verse 15. This is, the start of the second discourse that he does throughout the book. As you see in our outline of the whole thing, this is the second one. The first one was the Sermon on the Mount, very famous one, maybe the most famous one. The first five, and now we're reaching the second one. This has been after he has done a series of miracles, each in sets of three sets of three. And they're called, they're based on him being the Messiah, showing proof that he is the Messiah. He's the one that they were prophesied. A lot of them have to do with Isaiah, and they have reference to Isaiah and some of the things they talked about in Isaiah about what the Messiah will look like, and what the blessings on earth and this whole time of restoration will look like, is some of the same things that he's doing in these miracles. So in Isaiah 35, he talks about how during this time of restoration, the mute will talk, the deaf will hear, the paralyzed will walk again, the dead will raise. These are all things that Jesus accomplishes in those sections. And we looked at how in these last few chapters, chapters 8 through through chapter 9, how we have these three sets of three, where we saw the leper and the centurion servant and Peter's mother, and the demonized men, and the two blind men, the mute man, the dead girl, and the sick woman. All are pretty marginalized people. And Matthew focuses on people who a typical religious Jewish person would not think as high people that Jesus, if they thought Jesus was the Messiah, that he would target. These are marginalized people. These are a leper who is their own separate colony. These are women. These are Gentiles. These are people that other people would have avoided. Instead, we see Jesus going ahead and touching them and healing them and doing whatever that they need to be done. And so we saw that theme. We've also seen him as a healer, as the great physician, healing the sickness. So we saw that with the leper and the centurion servant. And this is emphasized in when he heals Peter's mother-in-law. And when he heals him and various others, at the end of that, it's quoted in Isaiah 53, where he says, he bore our sicknesses. And that's, of course, not as reference to physical sickness, but spiritual sickness, that Jesus will bear our infirmities, he'll bear our sicknesses. He took away our diseases, he'll bear our infirmities. And so, and you kind of see that throughout all these miracles, is that these physical things, these physical miracles, are a representation of what he's spiritually going to do through the cross and through him coming and establishing a new covenant. And so they all focus on that. And then in that second section, when he calm and see demonized men and paralyzed men, we see him, the word, and how his word was so powerful that he calmed the sea. He could tell the demons to go and they go. He could forgive sins with the paralyzed man. And the Pharisees questioned that, and then he made the man walk. And how his word was so powerful, it is just like God. How God created the heavens and the earth in the beginning, he can do the same. He has control over everything. And then finally, we saw the first resurrection from the dead, which would have been very powerful in the book of Matthew. And then also how he heals two blind men, which is something that no one could do. Only God could do. Again, according to Isaiah, only God can heal the blind. And so this is all culminate, basically saying this is the Messiah. No one's like him, and you need to follow him. And that's the in between each one of them. There's a general call like you need to follow me. People make up excuses, and he says you need to follow me and let the dead bury the dead. Say your goodbyes. I don't have any. I don't have a place to lay my head. You'll have to suffer my mistake, but you need to call me. And the second one, he calls Matthew to follow him. Again, another marginalized person. And then after this last section, we're getting into this longer discussion in which he sends out the 12 to call all of Israel to him. And he's going to talk about general things of what to do. So let's get into it because that's what we're getting into. This last section in chapter 9, verses 35 to 38, really set up what he's going to call his disciples to do, his 12 apostles to do, to take the message and all these miracles to the rest of the kingdom. Because he's one man. He's only one man. He can't do it all by himself. He needs help. And so he's been training these men. He's been helping guide these men, and now they are ready. And he sets it up. Matthew sets this up, this call of apostleship, this call of laborers, the Little Commission, with what he says in verse 35 to 38. So we'll start with that. Verse 35, and Jesus went through all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. But when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Excuse me. So he's going around. He's doing his normal thing. He's going from city to city, to village, and he's going to the synagogues. It seems like at the first, it kind of seems similar to what Paul does later on when he is going on his missionary journeys. And he is proclaiming that the kingdom of God is hand. He's healing every disease and every affliction. He's casting out demons. He's doing everything that needs. And basically, that's important because it shows that no disease was too powerful for him. If someone brought before him a man or a woman who was diseased or that had affliction or something was wrong, he healed them. And he had such compassion for them and he such care for them. He didn't just feel for them, but he also went out of his way to care for them. And he said they were like sheep without shepherd. Now, who was supposed to be their shepherd? Now, they needed Jesus and they needed God as their shepherd. But God left certain people in charge to be to guide and to shepherd the people of Israel. And that is the priest and the Pharisees, who were supposed to be doing that job. There were the ones that are supposed to guide the people of Israel, to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, to teach them the law and what God expected of them. But obviously they've been failing. They've been failing a lot. And so they're like a bunch of sheep. You can imagine this in the field, and they're just going everywhere. They have no one to tell them what not to do. They have no one to rescue them from their afflictions. And instead, and this is what caused him to have compassion for them, to care for them, because he sees them as helpless. They don't know any better. They're just kind of going around life trying to make the best they can. And this is what sparks his phrase to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but laborers are few. Basically saying there's so much harvest. There's so many people who need God in their life. There's so many people who are willing to reach out and take God into their life, but there's so few to help them. And there's so few to give them that information. And basically he says, this is what I'm calling you for. And so the next chapter, in chapter 10, he's going to be, this is why I need you. I can't do this just by myself. And so he committed to having 12 to follow him. And eventually it will grow to 72, and he'll have another commission in which he sends out 72 disciples to go into all Israel to do the exact same things he was doing. In verse 1 of chapter 10, it says he came out to them, his 12 disciples, and gave them the authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and affliction. So it's the same thing he was doing. It's almost the exact same thing he was doing. And to declare that the kingdom of God is at hand. This is what he's doing. There's so few laborers and he needs laborers. And so he appoints these 12 apostles to do that. And I think the same thing is true today. I think the harvest is so plentiful, no matter where you are. Even here in Melbourne, Florida, I think the harvest is so plentiful. There's so many people who need God in their life, and they know something's missing. They know something is out of their life, but there's so few laborers. Even if you take the Christians in our world, the people who go to the Church of Christ, very few of them actually want to labor. Very few of them actually want to do the labor that is necessary to care for the lost. And you don't have to be a preacher to do that. In fact, some of the most the best laborers are those who are not preachers. It's those who were the little women or the men who took people under their wing and guided them to God and brought them out of the dark hole of sin that had them. But they were the laborers, and they saw that the fields were white with harvest and that they needed God in their life. And that's what really kind of goes to verse 38, which he says, therefore pray earnestly the Lord of harvest to send laborers into his harvest. If we want to reap that harvest, if we want to be able to help as many people as we can, we need to pray. And this is evangelism 101. The only way people are saved and brought into the kingdom is if the Lord is working. And he can use us to do that, or he could use us and get people in his kingdom all by himself. He can do whatever he wants. And so we need to pray, and that's a prayer that we need to have today, is to pray earnestly to the Lord of harvest to send out laborers, to send people into the harvest. The Pharisees had failed. In Ezekiel 34, it kind of shows that they've been failing for a while. The priests and the Pharisees and all the spiritual leaders, they were supposed to do that, and now they're not. And then you read about his appointment of the 12 apostles. So starting in verse 2, the name of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who is called Peter, Andrew, his brother, lost my place. Andrew, his brother, James, the son of Zebedee, John, his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. And this is the first of 3 times all the apostles are listed in the Bible. It's once in, I believe, Mark, and once in Acts is when these are listed. And there's just a few things that are interesting about this. We don't have to go into who all these people are and what came of them, because surprisingly, for the most part, many of these people you rarely hear about. You may hear them mentioned once or twice, but other than basically Peter, James, and John, most of these people are not heard of that much, and Judas, of course. But I want to recognize a few things about them. One is that these are not the people that you would typically think of as being the ones to spread the news, to heal diseases and have authority over unclean spirits and tell the people that the kingdom of God is in. Like, these are the people, if you were to choose who you would pick to save the world, these would not be the people I would choose. The first 4 are fishermen, and then Philip is from, and Bartholomew is from Bethsaida, which is where Simon and Andrew are from. You have a tax collector, which is a hated people. Most Jews would not um, accept him or like him that much. And then you have also a zealot in there, which were basically terrorists. They would assassinate, they would destroy, they would set fire to things. They would do anything that caused the Roman people a headache, basically. And the fact that a tax collector and a zealot are in the same group of people is amazing. Because tax collectors were some of the people that zealots would assassinate because they worked for Rome and they're traitors. And that's how they viewed them. So the fact that a zealot, basically kind of almost like a terrorist for Israel, and a tax collector could both be in the same close group of people is amazing. Is something that is crazy to think about in our world. It'd be like today if a Jew and an Arab both were in a close group of people. That would stand out. That would be like crazy that two ethnic groups who are diametrically opposed to people, and there's been so much bad blood between the two, could be united by something. And that shows the love that they had and the example that they had. Also, what's kind of interesting is that they are in pairs. And I think this is intentional. I think, and we know through various other verses that Jesus sent them out in pairs, which Jesus had a lot of wisdom there, because it's so easy to be discouraged if you're just yourself. But if you had someone else, you have someone else's set of skills and everything that they need, and you can use each other's strengths and cover each other's weaknesses. It's just better if you're in pairs. And so he sends them out in pairs and not just individuals. So those are a couple of interesting points. If you want to know about each individual person and the history about him, and kind of the tradition that's been handed down, I'm sure you can kind of Google them, and you can look up some good commentaries on all of them. But that's kind of what we know, and that's kind of the reason that he appoints these certain 12 apostles, these 12 men that would be his ambassadors to the rest of Judea and eventually to the rest of the world. These are the laborers into the harvest, and it's going to be cool to see them. And so what he's going to do from here is he's going to basically prepare them. He's preparing them to go out into the world. He's preparing them to go out to Judea and preach the gospel and to preach that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And I think as we go through this, we'll learn some good lessons for us while we go into our evangelism. Not everything is going to be one-on-one. Not everything that was correct for them to do in that day is going to be correct in our circumstances. It's good for us to do our circumstances, but we can learn a lot. A lot of principles are still applicable to us today. So let's just look at this first one. This is we're just going to look at through Matthew 10, verse 15, so 5 through 15. And then next time we'll get through a lot more of it. Maybe even, I think we'll probably finish chapter 10 probably on Sunday. But verse 5 says, these 12 Jesus sent out, instructed them to go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and will proclaim as you go, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You receive without paying, give without pay. Acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics, or sandals or a staff. For a laborer deserves his food. In whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it, and stay there until you depart. As you enter the house, greet it. And if the house is worthy, let peace come upon it. But if it's not worthy, let your peace return to it. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust of your feet. And when you leave that house or town, truly I say to you, there will be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. So Jesus instructs the 12, and he instructs them to stay in Judea and to speak to the Jews. He tells them not to go to the Gentiles. He tells them not to go to the Samaritans, which probably most were most of the disciples were more than willing to do, because there was no love lost between Jews and Samaritans, or Jews and Gentiles. But he tells them to go to the Jews. This is to fulfill what was supposed to happen. And Paul talks about this in Romans 1 verse 16 and then 13 verse 46, where the gospel, where Jesus, everything was to the Jew first and then to the Greek, to the Gentile. It goes to the Jews first. This was part of their almost birthright. Because God has been with them, God's chosen people, and this is who Abraham came from, and all those promises came from, and the seed that would come from them. Because of that, they were the first ones to hear the gospel. And they heard the gospel for many years before the rest of the Gentiles did. Between Acts 2 and Acts 10, Acts 2 being when Pentecost and Peter proclaiming the gospel to the Jews of Jesus being dead and raised again, to Acts 10, which is the first Gentile convert, is many years, is several years. It's a decade, many think maybe two. So it's quite a bit of time in between those two events. And here he's going to the Gentiles first, or the Jews first, and then the Gentiles. And then he tells them, verse 6 and 8 is kind of like, or verse 7 and 8 is kind of like their mission statement, their mission phrase as they go through it. Their job description. They are to declare that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's what their number one is supposed to do. All the other things kind of affirm that of what they're saying. That the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and they should heal the sick, raise the dead, and cleanse the lepers, and cast out demons. Those are the things that they should do. And this is all, again, what they, as this is all like what Jesus was doing, as we see in, I believe, verse 35, as well as in chapter 4, verse 23, which kind of is inclusio for this section. But they are supposed to basically just follow what Jesus has been doing. Jesus is making many thems, is basically what he's doing. He's making a bunch of mini Jesuses so that he can reach more people. And the spread of the kingdom can grow more rapidly. And then he gives them basically tells them to not bring anything extra, to not receive any pay, to bring no extra money. Don't bring an extra bag or another set of clothes or an extra set of sandals or staff. Basically, don't bring anything extra. Now, is there anything wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with accepting pay or taking extra clothes or money for a trip? Absolutely not. That is fine. What I think Jesus is doing here is, one, he doesn't want people to think that his ministry is a money-making ministry, that he goes around town converting people so that they will give money to his cause. And it's all about greed. He doesn't want that. And one thing that I really like about this setup that we have is that you all pay me. The people who I may help convert and that I may study the Bible to, they don't directly pay me. If they want to go into be members at O'Galley and start giving there, then they would inadvertently pay me. But I'm not doing this for the money. There's many other things that I could do that I could probably easier gain money from and make a living from. But I do this because I want to teach people the gospel, and you've given me such a great way of doing this, and you allow me to do this. The money that you've paid me with, and there's nothing wrong with accepting pay for teaching. You can look at various passages in that. And Timothy talks about that, in Corinthians it both talks about that, of how a laborer is worthy of his wages. And so that's not bad, and neither is taking an extra tunic or something for a trip. What Jesus is doing here is he is growing their faith. He's making sure that they rely on him. And basically what he's doing is he's giving them a smaller setting in which they'll trust God a little bit, so that when they get to the bigger setting, they have the trust that is developed. So if he sent them right now into all the world, and these apostles went through the same things that they're going to go through all through Acts, they may not be they may fail, his faith may shake, they may not be as responsive. But because they give them, Jesus is giving them this chance to teach and to grow in this smaller setting, they will be able to they'll be able to successfully teach the gospel later on, which is a very smart strategy on his part. And then he gives them like a small what to do when you get to a town. If anyone accepts you in, let them accept you in. This is obviously someone who is accepting of their words and they're wanting to hear some more and they're interested. But if they are not accepting of you and they do not give you a place to stay and they want to hear nothing from you, then shake off the dust of your feet and move on to a different place. And basically that is just a physical sign of saying your blood is on your hands. We have told you that the kingdom of God is near. The kingdom of heaven is near, that you need to be ready, but you have refused to listen, and so that is your choice. And then he says in verse 15, as a warning, it'll be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than that for that town. They had the apostles, they had Jesus, they had these people inside their house or inside their town. Sodom and Gomorrah never got that kind of witnessing before. Yes, they got Lot, but he was only in one of those cities to begin with. And they never had that prophet come in and warn them. They should have known better, and they are responsible for their actions. But these people literally had the apostles come into the house or town, and they shut their door and refused and said, I didn't want to hear anymore. And then when judgment comes, they'll be kicking themselves a lot because they had it. They had it in their hands. Someone told them, and they said, no, I don't want it. And so it'll be more bearable for the day for Sodom and Gomorrah than it will be for them. And that will be very bad for them. It will be a bad situation. But it's a warning for all of us. It's a warning for us to accept truth when we hear it and to always run down the truth, no matter where it comes from. See if someone says is true, not to get caught up in our own presumptions or what we think is right, but always seek the truth. Compare to the word of God, compare to what we know of God, but to always seek the truth. Otherwise, it'll be more bearable in the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than it will be for us. And that's critical. But this is just the beginning of what Jesus will talk about in preparing his apostles to take the message of the kingdom of heaven to basically the world, especially Judea. So I hope that you learned a lot from this. I think this is a great passage, and this kind of sets up what we're going to talk about and the rest of it, the rest of the discussion about Jesus preparing the apostles, his disciples, his disciples, and what we can learn from that, because we are the disciples today. We are to take the good news of the gospel of the kingdom, of the king that we have, the great king that we have, to the world today. And what does that look like, and what do we need to be prepared for? And so I hope that you join me again Sunday for another section of God's word in the Gospel of Matthew.